Imploring die Lichtung's favor of a genuine letting be on the Methodos, the physiocrats, or why does Zizek remain Catholic? So I try to look at a number of questions, including the question which would be of utmost importance on how releasement stands within the tradition that is still upon us. So if we think about some motivations for Zizek remaining with Marx and therefore in a way with the physiocrats, the economic theorist who opened what Zizek understands as capitalism, but which largely coincides, I believe, with what Dugin calls liberalism, although with many wrenches could come in there. Many different saving clauses could be made, or caveats could be made, with respect to how deep the understanding of liberalism must be taken in order to make it mean anything. But so let's look at some avenues of motivation which seem to stem from the early economists, which only means about 300 years ago and 200 years ago. There was a change affected from the notion most dramatically of polity as a body which is for the sake of benefiting all the members of the body, to the notion of entrepreneurialism in the original laissez-fairist Cantillon, so about 1720 or so, proposing this. I think the phrase is that he is produced a crib of economic thinking, meaning out of which this now maturing young being is still rushing through our time. So moving from the old notion of the money and wealth being identical, gold, for instance, to the notion that ushers in both the capitalist and the communist theory properly. If you want to orient yourself to the dead middle of the theory, it's the theory of that land plus labor or productivity, land plus productivity yields the wealth of the country. And this idea is simultaneously taken up two ways. One, it's a secondary part of a theory of polity by which we can identify in a way with libertarians and the anti-monopolist sentiment, except their sentiment is modified by Bork and Bork's Reagan-era reworking of the theory of antitrust, basically to make it for the sake of the consumers. But originally, the point of the anti-monopoly thinking was, in Marx and Adam Smith, was for the sake of decentralizing governmental power with as much finesse as possible. Secondary to that was its productive capabilities. So the vast unleashing of the productive capabilities is on the physiocrat side, as it's understood more by Agamben, and Agamben thinks this is the side that's really empowered, the side that just deliberately wants to manage the disorder which comes from extreme entrepreneurial productivity rushing through effectively. So even if monopoly problems were put down, which sometimes the early physiocrats said sometimes you can't really do that because there's the trade companies for hundreds of years, like there's a South American train concern, and of course the Dutch East India and British East India Company, and the Mississippi Company, and so forth. So those were monopolies, but monopoly was basically looked down upon from the point of view of the political economy side, where the polis is still, as I said, trying to benefit the whole population for the reason that, say, if you take the example of England, you had 700 years without any actual famine. You had, in certain provinces, you had famines, but because the economy was well organized, it really followed the simple Adam Smith formula of the prices adjusted properly so that people could pay less for grain where they really needed it. That held within England, or largely not. Of course, obviously, there's a Irish potato famine, but even there, you could say that was straightforwardly for governmental reasons because it wasn't considered part of England, rather than because of actual extreme dearth, or that the grains could have been shifted. So this shows the power that the economic settlement on the principles of how the economy is supposed to work yield once you have high productivity and high entrepreneurial engine going, and how easy then it can be for instead of the old style of a despot who operates on the basis of maintaining order, you get the as I just said, the management of the disorder. So but this works in different ways. So if you stick with the physiocrats who are introduced, let's look at it this way. There's the earth, which is some specific person going around his business. Then there's the sky, which is the whole scene, and from where you get the principle of the good. So we're dealing with two different principles of the good. One would be for the sake of distributing the sovereignty so that it's not all in one place. The Thomas Paine type of stuff. Government is a necessary evil, but an evil. It's necessary in some respect, but it's evil. So Zizek and so forth. But then you have this other notion of the good, which is the productivity. So if you're serving the productivity, then you can see on both sides this function. So like in the critique of Marx, where it said that if you had a man who worked for 100, say a very good cabinet maker who worked a long time, and then there was nobody wanted to buy his cabinet because everybody went to IKEA or whatnot. The point here would then be to produce a society where people would pay this man his the intrinsic value of his labor plus the cost of the materials that he used. So that could become those could become principles around what this notion that money is to be tied to labor and land, or productivity in land, can become a principle which then one can endeavor to maintain no matter what the empirical conditions are. Or it can be viewed simply as a way of measuring nature, so that we'd look and we'd see, here's how many people are willing to risk uh, going through an apprenticeship to become a cabinet maker, even though the market's not right for it. And then we just see by what happened what the natural value was. So you could take it from either side, and taking it from one side or the other would yield more of a Catholic position, but in a perverse way, because the goal would not be for the good of the polity, but it would rather be, or for some universal good above any particular polity, but it would rather be for the sake of productivity. So you can see how there's different trends going on here. But so far as we're moving back and forth between sky, productivity, or good of the polis, or good of the universal, and earth, what the particular individual is doing and how they their first person immediate experience, we're not getting to the letting be. The letting be has to be somehow touching on both of those, so that the releasement would be to stop this treating this motion from the cave to the sun as a motion where the sun is the preferred. So we're more in a Nietzschean universe here, where we don't know where the up and down is, but we're still so familiar with going up to the sun and coming back down to our daily life, that in following that circuit in various examples, some of which we try to make more concrete as we go along, we can then try to see what Dasein is. We can try to see what Heidegger sees as happening here. And so going forward, especially, we want to see what history means here, and what history is set in contradistinction to, and why it has been separated out from historiology.